Welcome everyone here to the Agile Marketing meetup here that's been sponsored, arranged by EMC and MyTech. Since I know we're on a tight schedule, we've got a lot of really great speakers. I'm going to dive in. I want to start this with a really brief introduction of who we have on the panel. Introduce myself. Scott Brinker. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at a marketing technology company called ION. We've been working with Agile both in our development teams and our marketing teams for about 4 years. I also write a blog that talks a bit about this, the Chief Marketing Technologist blog, chiefmartech.com. Ian, can you give us a brief introduction?
Sure. Hopefully everybody can hear me well. I'm Bruce. I'm Vice President of Communications at McDougall Interactive, a SaaS provider based in Charleston.
I'm Frank. Mike Solution.
Dave? Are they on?
We should be live.
Are they on?
Try the
Can you hear me? Does that work?
Red one does. So
Why don't we share?
You guys hear me okay? I'm Frank Days. I've been blogging and speaking and podcasting about the topic of Agile Marketing for the last 5 years or so. My day job is I'm the acting CMO of a cloud storage company that's in stealth mode. Hopefully be coming out of the stealth mode in the next months.
My name's John Cass. I'm Director of Digital Marketing Services at McDougall Interactive in the North Shore. I've been interested in Agile Marketing for a couple of years and worked with Frank on the Agile Marketing Agility podcast and also helped organize Spring Zero, which was a big conference a couple of years ago in San Francisco, when we had the largest gathering of Agile marketers in the country at the time, 35 people.
Thanks, John. Can you hear me all right? Is this working now?
Yep.
My mother always taught me when you introduce yourself, you have to stand up, so I'm standing up. My name is David Quinn, and I'm the Senior Director of Corporate Marketing Engagement Office at EMC Corporation out in Hopkinton. We've been doing Agile Marketing for about 2 years now. And before that, I worked basically in the web team, ran the web team, various websites, and about 2 years ago, the idea of Agile Marketing became an actual job, and we created an entire group and organization that drives it through the company.
Terrific. Thank you. Yeah, some of these guys are the real pioneers of Agile marketing. So the way we'll do this is we'll do a couple of questions where I'd like to get the stories from these guys so you can just hear the pain points that led them in marketing, take a look at Agile methods and how that worked out for them. And that'll probably take us about halfway through. Feel free if at any point in time you have a question, just jump right in. But then for the second half of this, we'll leave it entirely open to Q&A. You're in the spotlight. And if everyone's shy, I've got a few questions we can fall back on. Before we begin though, I'm just curious, how many of you by show of hands have some experience with Agile in any context? Okay, terrific. A little bit more than half of you. I think just so we get everyone on the page here, Frank is going to start out with, I think was like the 3-minute lightning version of what you would need to know about Agile for the rest of this conversation to at least hold together. So Frank, you want to take that away?
Thank you, Scott. Just a quick anecdote before we get started. Part of the reason why, is this guy on?
Can't hear you.
Is this one on?
Yeah.
Just a quick story. I did a talk back in November. I was in Sweden, and I was talking to a room full of marketing professionals, probably not too dissimilar to this. And what happened, I got about 10 minutes into the talk, and a guy raised his hand and said, sorry, what is this waterfall thing? So part of the reason why we wanted to do a brief introduction is to talk a little bit about what Agile is and how people are adapting Agile marketing. So my personal story as a technology CMO, I've been leading startup software companies for about 15 years. I got motivated to look at Agile as a platform really around based upon the need to be much more responsive and adaptive in the way we work. If you think about working in a startup environment, a marketing plan has a shelf life of about 6 or 8 weeks at best, sometimes even shorter than that. So needing a new framework is important. Also, I hate writing marketing plans, and companies where I started using Agile, first started using it, our tech team did an Agile methodology, and they'd have a meeting every morning, and I walked through their Agile, and I realized, well, why don't we do our marketing meeting right after that? So, what drives people to think about Agile? Well, first of all, looking at the systems that people have in place, the way we run marketing today, with all its interconnectedness and digital media and the speed at which things move, we need a new management paradigm. We need a new approach to managing the way we do this marketing that can pick up the data, adjust, adapt, learn, and also be increasingly transparent. And that's what we can get out of Agile. So this was the first definition that I've actually ever seen anywhere written. IDC, their marketing CMO practice, did a report in 2010, and they kind of basically talked about, they did some really early research of the early adopters and what people were thinking about. The easiest way to take the definition of Agile from Agile marketing or Agile for marketing is people are adapting really some of the basic work principles that the software development world has used in Agile. Those principles are, you do your work in small batches. So rather than having a big epic marketing plan for the year, you put in your work in 2 to 4 week batches called sprints. Within those 2 to 4 weeks periods, you have a small number of work themes. You agreed upon those themes in a big group in a transparent way. And then you meet daily to discuss, what did I achieve yesterday? What do I want to achieve today? What are my barriers to success? And this small batches of work with frequent iterations are really crucial characteristics of using Agile in the marketing world. So thinking about what are some of the benefits, the adaptiveness is probably the biggest thing I see for my personal life, is that it allows us to be responsive, and it also allows us to make real-time trade-offs without getting too crazy. The transparency is essential. We're in an hyper-transparent world as marketers. Why shouldn't our marketing planning process be that transparent? In my current role, we do 1 month sprint plans. In that sprint planning meeting is my CEO, my head of sales, my head of business development, as well as my entire marketing team. We as a group plan what's going to happen rather than it being done by marketing. So it's never this, as Mike Volpe from HubSpot said at a meetup, that people think that they understand marketing better and people don't complain about marketing about what it is. If you have it in this hyper-transparent world, you can actually deliver a plan and deliver results that stay on top of things. The other big benefit being, as a marketer, I often receive I used to receive the complaints of, I've been asking for this for 5 months syndrome, right? We all run into that. Well, the benefit of having Agile, if someone complains about something more than once, you can dump it into your current sprint and make sure it gets done. And finally, it's really an effectiveness and efficiency thing, that the highest priority things are being done on a regular basis. Your team's not jumping around necessarily from priority to priority, and if the priorities are shifting and the items are moving, that those real-time trade-offs are made in your sprint planning meetings on a daily basis. So with that, I'll hand it over to Scott.
Terrific, thank you, Frank. So I thought the first question we could begin with is have each of the panelists just go through what brought them to Agile. Like if you could each pick one pain point, you were saying we were really frustrated about X, you came to discover this Agile thing, maybe this is a way to solve it. I'd love to hear just what motivated that, and then how did that actually turn out? Who wants to start?
Thanks, Scott. That's a great question for me because I'm happy to say that the way EMC got into Agile marketing has nothing to do with somebody saying, hey, you know what we should do is Agile marketing. Who's going to do it? Quinn, go do it. It didn't really work that way. In fact, what the issue was, we had two competing problems. One on the side of the corporate marketing team who provides a set of services to the rest of the company, be that the .com team, the search team, the events team, the TV team, had a problem, and that was very simply put, everybody that needed anything from EMC marketing would come and knock at, let's use the creative team as an example, knock at their door and say, can I get an hour of your time? I have some needs, I want to sit down and tell you what they are. And they came in, And they rambled on for an hour, and the creative lead said, okay, yeah, okay. And Joe or Jane got up and said, I'll be back to you next week, and walked out of the door. And the creative lead took that deck, and he looked around his desk, and he's got a pile this high on one side of him, and another pile this high on the other side of him, and he put it in the pile. And a half hour later, somebody else came and said, hey, Mr. Creative, you know what I need? I need this and this and this. And it goes on, and his pile goes bigger and bigger. The question for him becomes, what's his priority? What else is going on with this? They have no knowledge. And that was a problem. And the truth is, the way the creative director handles it, just like human nature, like everybody else, is how did I work with that individual the last time? That makes a difference about where in my priority order it goes. If they were great with me, they go up pretty high. If they were, lack of a better term, a jerk, they may go down in the bottom of the pile. The flip side of the problem is that group or part of the business that comes forward to marketing to say, I need your services, they're door knockers. And they literally go around and say, hi, Mr. Creative, can I take an hour of your time? I'd like to tell my story. And then that was Monday. And on Tuesday, they go around to the EMC.com team. Can I take an hour of your time? Let me tell you a story. And they do that 11 times. A couple things happen there. Is they tell their story to 11 different people, none of whom hear exactly the same thing. All of whom work in marketing, but they don't hear the same thing. The second part of that is they go and knock on those doors, but they forget that they might need X or Y. Our best example has always been search engine marketing. Oh, I need a web page, I need this, I need this, I need this, get it all done. How do you track that? I don't know. Well, did you go to talk to the search engine marketing folks? No, I didn't know. I didn't know about that. Maybe the next time I'll remember. So that business owner, the person who comes forward to marketing, they're in a one big crapshoot. Who do I talk to? Who do I talk to? And they waste all this time. So the problem we tried to solve was, how do we bring these folks together one time, one discussion, transparently, open, and begin to work together?
Well, for me, I think it's a number of things. I've been involved in social media for quite a few years. I started blogging back in 2003 and started using social media as a way to market companies and organizations from those days. And I think that there's been a continuation. It was almost like a trial run in a way. Social media tested the boundaries of what's possible in marketing, because we had to build new processes in order to be able to run social media correctly. And then I think, 4 or 5, well, actually, I suppose I'd say after the 2006 election, 2008 election, I suppose, it would be more people realized that social media was part of the mix in marketing, because those election cycles always accelerate the pace of marketing innovation, I believe. And social media, if you will, is a trial run for content marketing, in that there are more devices, there are more channels, and there's a greater need, if you will, of marketers to sit down and really organize themselves much better because of the changing nature of the industry. The other thing was that I was involved with the local Boston chapter of the American Marketing Association, and it was the one thing that we never talked about, which is how marketers organize themselves. Yet lots of marketers would come up to me and say that they would like to know more about that particular topic. So when I first became familiar with Agile marketing, it seemed like a set of tasks and tools and tactics to be able to manage these new situations with content marketing and also social media. So that's why I really got involved in it. Plus, I was working for an agency who had a very large bank, and it was really interesting. I remember one time we were sitting in a meeting where we had people from the magazine, staff in the bank, we had somebody from SEO, but they'd forgotten the PR people. So I think similar experience to David when he speaks about SEO, which is you really have to keep an eye on all of those different myriad elements in today's world of content marketing in order to be effective. So that's why I really started using Agile marketing. It's just to manage for the new reality.
So it was 2007, and I had taken over as the VP of marketing for a software company here in Cambridge. And the average tenure as CMO of a technology company is probably something in the 20-month range, depending on whose survey you do. So I was tasked with the idea, first of all, I needed to create a marketing plan. As a part of my process, I was going through the charter remains of my predecessor, all of the pages of documents and stacks, and I found a 53-page marketing plan that this guy had written, and I thought, what a waste of time. And then the next day we were growing quite quickly. We were growing about 50% a year, and we would get in these modes where we were really focused on recruiting. So my CEO would get pissed off and say, okay, we're going to meet every morning. We're going to meet every morning to talk about recruiting until we get this problem solved. And then I had this idea. I said, well, why don't we run our marketing team the same way? I mean, why do we only do this meeting every day when it's, we're in a crisis? Why don't we do this every day and use that as our standard operating procedure? Because again, we have the transparency, we have the accountability, we have everyone involved. So that was kind of my epiphany in terms of it. It was later on, about a year later, that I discovered that the software developers have been doing this for years, and they called it Agile. And then since then, I've been podcasting with John and blogging about it, and that's kind of where we've come from here.
So after this one to you three, I feel like, can you hear me okay?
You have to hold it up
Hold it
close.
closer, is that better? I feel like a complete imposter. If you'd asked me that question you asked at the start, how familiar are you with Agile Marketing, I would have not put my hand up. So I came to Agile Marketing, I suspect, is that better? Yeah. I suspect through the way many people come to Agile Marketing, which is the mechanism Frank talked about. I work for a SaaS software company in Charlestown down the street, and we had moved our product development team to an Agile methodology. So we were starting to see, instead of big releases every 6 months of product with new features and functionality, we were starting to see releases of product every 6 weeks. And the marketing organization couldn't cope with that. On top of that, we were about to announce a brand new product in the market, which was going to compete in that very cluttered and competitive space of file sync and share applications, Dropbox, if you will. And we had started on developing a very large mega plan to announce this project. And the plan got bigger and more complicated and more elaborate and more involved, and never got launched. We had this kind of inability to get started on the project, in fact. We needed something like marketing made use of, because somebody actually used that phrase with me. How can we get unconstipated in marketing? And that's when the product development team came to us and said, you need to get agile and on and so forth. So we took what was this huge plan and tried to break it down into very little bite-sized chunks. We started to meet on a daily basis, and started on I would say about an 8-week process to try and launch this product into the marketplace. And we met our deadline, we launched the product, it was successful in many ways. I don't know if we'll be talking about this later, but I certainly have my issues with Agile Marketing, which I'm happy to debate here. But I can tell you that we went from the classic approach of this huge plan that was never going to be realized, that was going to become shelf-life, to actually launching a product into the marketplace relatively successfully. So at that level, it was absolutely a success.
Terrific. So to just sort of echo back the themes here, when you have this combination of you're dealing in a situation where your marketing requirements are changing, perhaps very rapidly, where you've got this fragmentation of more and more small things that need to be done, and particularly in some of these larger organizations where you just have so many people that are fluidly needing things from marketing, what sort of structure do you put around that? And that's what led these guys to Agile. I think what I'd love to hear is, as soon as you decided to make this leap and give this a try, what was it like getting started with your team? What was your first little project like?
I'll take that one, and to start with, and I'm smiling because the term horror show comes to mind. and what we're hearing today here is different size companies, it works differently. And I'm a big proponent of that in terms of agile marketing, that there's no particular recipe, but that depending on what your company or your world is like, that's how you work your way into it. But to answer the question, we started off with a pilot. And literally, myself and 3 other people, each of whom had a real job, as we called it. We sort of developed a plan around Agile. I'd say we made it up, and we grabbed onto a particular campaign that EMC was running, and we piloted it. And how did that go? It was rough, and I'll tell you why right out of the gate. Big word, change. The people trying to accomplish the campaign, we went at it differently than they've ever worked on it before. The people within marketing who had to provide different services to the campaign, it was a change. And as everybody knows, that is the most painful thing in the world. And it wasn't that Agile did it this way or we want to do it that way, it was just change. We're used to it, we get it done this way, we get it done. So we had to overcome, and I was talking to a couple of different people already this morning, and to me, one of the biggest points about what is Agile, it's learning to be communicative. It's talking with people, it's getting people on board with you about how to go about achieving something. And that's really the core of it. And so we fought our way over the humps of change and just kept working to bring people together and show them that when they were together and working transparently, openly, so that everybody knew what was going on, those 2 sides of the coin that I talked about before, it became a little bit more positive. And we did it again, and it became more positive. And as 6 months, 9 months went on, suddenly people were knocking at our door and saying, I need to get things done. Can I come to you guys first before I go talk to these other people? And to us, that was like, okay, we did it. And that's what turned into an organization at EMC Corporation that does this as their business.
Well, I've got a couple of things, I think 3 things: Scrum, Sprint, and metrics. I think one of the big learnings that I got from this that was really interesting was that daily Scrum, that activity of having that 15 minutes and having a check-in on the task that you have for a team, was really helpful, especially when getting started up with both the team members in building relationships with them, but also building trust and credibility with senior management. I think that's one of the advantage. So for me, I think that tool in your toolkit as part of Agile Marketing, a Scrum can be a very, very helpful mechanism for communicating both with all of your team members, especially when going to a new situation, and building that active relationship because everybody knows what they're doing. And then also on the other side, if you have a new relationship with, say, senior management, it allows you to build trust very quickly with them. And then on Sprint, I think the learning that I've had on that, and I've struggled a little bit over the years in different companies that I've worked at in using sprints, just because I don't think I always necessarily do enough work on the review and planning side. So I think one tip that I would give to everybody is really make sure that you're doing a good job on the planning session for the sprint, the sprint for the next week or the sprint for the next 6 weeks, whatever it is, whatever your scale of time is. And then also make sure that you're spending enough time on the review process at the end of the sprint to make sure that you're getting the learnings from it, and then of course planning ahead. And then lastly, of course, metrics. If you don't have an end result, what's the point of doing this?
Great. I guess personally, in my current job, as the VP of Marketing, when I pitched for the job, I pitched Agile as a part of my framework. So I brought that in with me, and that's, I was at the top of the food chain, so I could certainly impose my will upon people. But I think for the rest of us, we're not always in that situation. And I'll tell a story about when Ian and I were working together at Novell a few years ago. We had this process. Anyone familiar with the term interlock? It's a big company. I see hands being raised, right? It's you bring together the 30 people who are involved in marketing for the one thing, and everyone creates the 30 or maybe 60. Yeah, and everyone comes over a 3-day period and presents for an hour and a half their 40 cells of the spreadsheet, and then at the end of those 2 days, they proclaim that as the plan. Every 2 weeks, you have a meeting a 3-hour meeting where you go cell by cell by cell by cell through the 800 cells in the spreadsheet. And when they call Frank, and they go, Frank, and then I go, oh, sorry, because no one listens. So when I was trying to figure out, could I re-engineer the interlock process? And then I thought to myself, never in a million years am I going to change that. So what I ultimately did was I was running social media and search engine marketing at the time, and we were looking at rolling out some content marketing programs, in this case a couple of content marketing portals, to try to do some tests and experimentation. And what I did to get it going was I got 2 executive sponsors. So I got the VP of product marketing, who had a lot of influence, as well as my boss, who was the VP of corporate communications, to buy into the project and the process. And then I went and kind of sold the idea to the head of our interactive team, who gave us one of his producers who bought into the process. And then we got a product marketing manager, and it was more of a skunk works. So it comes back to the idea of starting small if you can. If you don't have the ability to drive it across the whole thing. I think that the examples that John and I have seen in the podcast that we've done is either the whole company's agile or someone did it in a small project. So my advice to you is, if you're looking to do it, start small, pick a project where you think there's a large likelihood of success, and make sure your team is full of people who are bought into the process, and people who are comfortable with living with the uncertainty and things that are going to come all along with working in an agile environment.
Yeah, so just to reinforce my rookie status here, all the advice we just heard, we didn't take any of that. So we had this mega plan, as I described it, that was going nowhere, and we really decomposed that mega plan into a bunch of tiny little plans. We used an online tool that many of you may be familiar with called Trello. Anybody heard of Trello? Yeah. So we decomposed this huge plan into probably thousands of little Trello cards, and tried to manage the process in an agile fashion around those Trello cards. And I should give a shout out at this point to my colleagues in product marketing, who are really the pioneers of this whole agile process, Geico, Palacine, and Laura Crozier, who kept us on track through this process. But I'd say one of the mistakes we made is we tried to write way more than we could chew when we first started using agile in a marketing context. We ran into problems because of this around resource planning. It was very, very hard for us to figure out where resources were required for each of these little Trello cards, and to bubble that up in a way that we could understand, for example, where our corporate comms team or our design team were going to be required in a certain week or month to do work. We bumped into all sorts of problems around that. I think I actually had this conversation with somebody in the audience just before we started. We had a pretty good strategy in place for what we wanted to achieve. We had excellent goals and metrics. We understood how we were going to measure all these things to the point of transparency in marketing. It was very, very hard for us to link that strategy to this agile marketing process, and to make sure that we were on track, heading in the right direction, and that we were going to meet the KPIs we'd set for ourselves around this project and around the launch. It was just really, really tough for us to keep on track around that. Other than that, the advice I would give would be listen to your R&D team if they're already using Agile, because a lot of the language and the process experiences that they have, a lot of the methodologies actually does apply to the marketing world. Even though they're developing code and you're not, a lot of their experiences will be very applicable. We actually learned a lot from our R&D team because they were so familiar with the process. They had figured out the kinks and charms of an agile process, and we were able to learn from that over time.
Yeah, that's a really good point. This is a question I know a lot of people typically have when they start to adapt to Agile, particularly in marketing, is Agile feels like it's great, that it's this very adaptive, changeable process, but how do you connect that to strategy? I'm wondering if maybe the other 3 of you could just weigh in a bit on that trade-off. How do you keep a company vision or a project vision that might last more than one sprint while you're doing this very agile, iterative process?
I would answer that and say that, in all frankness, we don't find that difficult. maybe it's a case of a big company of 1,000 different things going on, and we're grabbing them and moving them through. But within each engagement that we have, we are doing the prioritizing, we are ensuring that the most important things get done first, and by default, they follow the strategy, and we ensure, as part of the team that works on that, that whatever we're working on is indeed tracking to the strategy that's been defined. And we don't spend time, and a great point's made earlier, building out huge marketing plans anymore. We have a strategy, their actions are going to take place, and we call it the marketing backlog of activities, and it's hundreds of line items long, but instead of saying, how are we going to get all this done, we prioritize it and start at the top and start working through. And when something changes, and it changes, the strategy changes, and therefore what we need to do changes. We move that to the lower end of the pile and go after the things that make sense at that time.
I think I'd agree. I mean, it's really part and parcel of the process of agile marketing. It's focused on distinct projects. Although I think maybe the point you're trying to raise there, Scott, is in that context of larger events, maybe how do you manage it? I think you just split up the tasks. A good way of thinking about this is, from the context of content marketing, can you, perhaps you want to, often marketers bite off more than they can chew, but I think today with content marketing and also techniques like agile marketing, you can do those bigger projects by splitting things up. So, hey, so maybe I want to write an ebook. Well, actually, if I write a series of blog posts that then go into an ebook, then I can actually produce that. And if you can build that mechanism and focus perhaps one project on one ebook with a series of blog posts getting there, you can be successful. And then you can imagine perhaps writing a book by, perhaps writing 12 ebooks in a year, and at the end of the process, you publish a book.
Thanks, John. The fact of the matter is, even though I run my team using Agile, I still have an annual budget, which gets updated every 6 months. Our business still has a sales forecast. That's an annual sales forecast that gets updated probably every 6 months, sometimes more frequently. I have lead goals for the year broken down by month. We still have key themes, which my CEO put together for his 14 commandments for the first quarter. So we still have some macro level vision coming in from the board. We still have product vision coming in from products. We still have, now when we do our sprint planning on a monthly basis, we start with all of that atomic material as our assumptions and then weigh our long backlog. David has the same, you have the same situation. We refer to it as the graveyard because it's often where things go to die. But we have this massive backlog which has hundreds of items in it. But then ultimately in that 1 month plan, when we're making decisions about what items are going to get into the individual sprint, if 60 to 70% of the items are pretty obvious for any given month, that last 30% of the items we weigh against, again, the financial goals, the budget constraints, the priorities, and people's needs. So while it is agile and adaptive, it also has to be within the construct of your business. And your CFO is not running agile. Your board of directors not running agile. So you still, and I know Ian's going to say, I'm in a public company, so I'll hand it off to him and let him add to that.
Yeah, I just finished my Q4 year-end financial results yesterday for a publicly traded company. And I can tell you that whole process is light years away from anything agile. And the reality is that ethos of you're reporting to a board, you're reporting to the street, you're setting high-level goals and objectives for the company, it's never going to be agile. In fact, if we start getting agile on that process, Wall Street reacts in a profoundly negative way. So they need consistency, they need long-term vision, and the reality is you're going to have to work within that framework at some level. It's not an agile world out there. But you can be agile within it. So, you can create campaigns, and you can create projects. You can do the e-book campaign, or you can decide that you're going to go after regulated industries and build out campaigns and inbound marketing activities and decompose those into agile pieces that you can implement. And something that I profoundly agree with the other people on the panel is, I think marketing can be very unreactive often. They set off in a direction, and it's very hard to change that direction. It's very hard to correct course. And if you start getting data in that suggests maybe you're not doing the right set of things, or you're doing the right set of things, but you could double down on something and send something to the graveyard next week. It's very, very hard to do that unless you have an agile methodology, unless you're making some tough decisions in a very quick way, fail fast, that kind of thing. And I think agile allows you to do that very effectively.
Great. So we're about the halfway point.
Okay.
Perfect for questions.
Good. Thank you. Hans Wild from Blue Collar. I just was wondering, this is internal change. You know, your marketing team, how they work together, how they serve other units and business units in your company and other people. What about the external resources, like agencies and all kinds of external resources? Or, that's maybe second question, your existing technologies, which you're using right now to do your work, to do your job, all those technology around in the marketing space. What's your experience with that? Are they also, for example, that agency at the daily scrum each morning? How did that work?
I'll take that part of that first. That's a great question, because I'm sure a small company to large company, it works the same. There's always a piece of the puzzle that's outside, and that's extremely accurate at EMC. We have a number of different agencies that we work with, and we struggle with just that question in the beginning. We're building a virtual team, just like an agency does. Do we bring the agency in and have them be part of that? The reality check for us was, if we're going to meet every day, or in our case, 3 times a week, that wasn't realistic. Another example is we're a global company. 2 of our major agencies are in Europe. That cuts out half of the day. We have enough trouble working California to Boston. So what we decided to do was have the responsible function within corporate marketing that utilizes the agency. I'll use our creative team again as an example. They do a lot of work internally, but they farm material out as well. We asked them to be the advocate for the agency in the meeting, because it was simply a practicality question, but it came up right away for us, that kind of problem.
Well, on the external agencies question, it's interesting because I think I've heard of examples where agencies have been the driver for using agile marketing across the country. And that's from the podcast that I've done with Frank over the years, and also doing some of the outreach from one of the conferences that we ran a couple of years ago, Sprint Zero. So I think agencies actually have helped to be evangelists for this process, and because they're running the agile marketing process, it's a good relationship. However, I've also heard of circumstances where companies, they're using agile marketing and they've gone back to their agencies, and the agency basically said, no, we don't want to do that. So in some circumstances it was just, the agency they wanted to continue to work with, so they worked around it, or they looked for somebody else. And then on technologies, I think what my recommendation would be, there's various ones out there, and I think as being part of the movement, I think we want to encourage the technology companies to provide tools for agile marketing, and of course there's an existing set of companies that are providing tools like Trello that work for agile development, but we'd like to see more for agile marketing as well. And I just advise you perhaps connect with the community on the Facebook, the Agile Marketing Facebook community, and then also on the Twitter community at Agile Marketing.
Great. As far as agencies go, I mean, when I always think of agencies, having worked my almost entire career in companies, I think about the opportunity to grow soap patch, get some cool glasses and wear ironic t-shirts, but that kind of masks the fact that most agencies are really kind of crummy, low-margin businesses. No offense to my agency friends, but it's a difficult business to be in, right? You spend a lot of time pitching business, and margins are thin. It can be a lot of fun with the work you do. You can do some really amazing, interesting work, but the margins are terrible. So agencies tend to really gravitate towards more waterfall kind of planning approaches, right? The creative brief, and then you create a creative brief and you deliver to the creative brief, right? The idea of a moving target and uncertainty is anathema to the idea of managing a well-managed agency. It's going to cost you money and cost you time. So, it's an interesting decision. I had one of the good friend of mine is president of an agency, B2B agency in Cambridge, and he said, well, they've experimented with it, and one of their clients was using Agile as an excuse for all their bad behavior and inability to make decisions. So I think that if you're going to do Agile and you want to involve your agency, certainly the ones that John and I have interviewed who've been doing it will include a member of the agency on the Scrum team, and we'll try to get them involved. The creative brief is a construct that's probably not going to go away anytime soon for most agencies. Other than some agencies, the more progressive ones are on retainer and do measure work by output or do measure work by results or sometimes by hours. But I think it's going to be a long time before the agency world 100% goes Agile.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is working in an Agile way with agencies can quickly become very expensive. So the caution I would give is don't expose your agencies outside the company to perhaps every iteration of your Agile process, because you're going to burn hours, you're going to burn time, and if you're correcting course on a too frequent basis, it's going to upset the relationship and perhaps make them less productive than they need to be, was my experience. They can certainly work within an Agile process, but you have to manage that very efficiently for them, was my experience. I actually had much greater difficulty with some of the internal teams in my company and getting them on an Agile path. I'm not going to point fingers too much, but some of the internal teams where I require prudence as a publicly traded company, they are just by their nature not Agile. And so you often have to work a process around the realities of their world. But agencies, I didn't have too many difficulties.
One thing I'll add on the agencies too, Google actually started a project a couple years ago where they were trying to work with agencies to see the evolution of marketing. A little bit of what they're talking about with these groups is a little bit, far-reaching. I wouldn't say it's practice today. But if you do a Google search for something called Agile Creativity, this was something that was a partnership between Google and a number of large agencies to explore how could you map Agile-like approaches into agency management. It's certainly worth a read and interesting to see the agencies who tried to adopt that in some of their stories. Yes?
If you have such a misunderstanding, the general population has a misunderstanding of what Agile is, how difficult is it to convince your CEO, your IT teams, and people in these organizations to go along with your Agile efforts?
Well, first I would say don't tell them that it's Agile. It's task management. It's just a new process. So you don't necessarily have to go through the agony of explaining this new concept and saying, well, that sounds a bit weird, and why are we doing that? But rather just say, and if you think that is going to be the case, then don't open up the conversation as Agile, but rather say, this is the process of how we manage things. It's the weekly task meeting, or it's the daily, task update meeting, those sorts of things.
And I know it's again a function of the size of the company, but IT right now has no say in the way marketing works, maybe in siloed fashion and get their work done. To John's point, it's a methodology, it's a framework about how we get things done. If you do have a conversation with that CEO, or in a larger company, the head of marketing, the conversation goes like this. Are you interested in getting fewer things done, but in a much better way than you've ever done before? The quality of what we put out, then we can look at this prioritized, adaptable method. If you're looking for our teams to be more efficient than they've ever been before, we should adopt this methodology. And before I go, I would want to say, we've heard definitions of what Agile is. In fact, I really liked what Frank had up there in terms of his definition. But at EMC, we did the same thing where we brought, I think Ian mentioned it, we brought a Scrum Master in from the development world, sat this woman down and said, tell us, how do we do it, how do we do it? And she rattled off 439 things that we had to do. And she walked out of the room, and one of my team members, who we were in this building mode, said, okay, so we have to do this, this, this. And I shook my head and I said, no, we don't have to do any of that. We have to do what works for marketing, what works for the size of our operation, what works for the culture in our company. That's what we have to do. And I said, that point, and that point, and that point, I don't want to do those. Those aren't going to work here. So we drove to the ones that worked. And that was the sell that we gave upwards to our CMO. And so we're going to do it this way to achieve those kind of things about efficiency and working on the right things and building better quality marketing pieces.
Yeah, I think this is a great question. We actually had no problem at all. In fact, our CMO and even our CEO was a very, very strong proponent of moving to something like an agile methodology. Partly because they'd had exposure of it in the R&D world, they knew what agile meant at a conceptual level. They saw the productivity benefits in the product development sphere, and so they mapped that to marketing and thought, rinse and repeat, do it in marketing, and that constipation problem that I alluded to earlier will go away. And they saw it go away. They saw results. They could get weekly updates on things. They were very, very big proponents of us moving to this.
John and I have interviewed over 20 professionals as part of our podcast, and one of the things we've kind of realized, and even from I look back to the meetup we had with Mike Volpe from HubSpot, they were probably one of the earliest companies, significant marketing organizations using Agile, is that Agile, with a capital A, is a really, really mature approach, which if you Google it and look it up, there are conferences all over the world, there are meetups, there are if you go to Barnes and Nobles, you'll find books and books and books about Agile. There's a real dogma to it. There's a whole industry of Scrum Masters, individuals who coach companies, Scrum coaches. But in the marketing world, from the people we've interviewed, we've kind of realized that most of the folks in marketing are doing exactly what David referred to, is that I want to say picking and choosing. I talked to a Swedish guy a couple of months ago, and he said, well, he almost was apoplectic at how little of it, what we were doing in the name of Agile. So, I mean, the recurring themes that we've seen are people working in small batches around common themes that increase transparency. The things that marketers are not doing are, the developers do this thing called planning poker, where they have these cards using Fibonacci numbers and this whole methodology around sizing tasks and trying to make sure that the amount of work and what they call story points, the amount of work people are doing in a given month aligns with the amount of capacity. And they have these charts called burn down charts, which show how the work is being done in the month versus it's the way they kind of handle the capacity problem. Well, I don't know, I can't say I can speak of a single marketer who's doing that. Try it. So yeah, and it's because the story that I've been heard from many people is that the overhead of that is not relative to the benefit you get from it. So my personal experience, and it's a very unscientific method, is we have this notion of an average task. And I know in each of the companies I've used it, the average on a given month, my team has, like this, my current company, I know we can do between 40 and 50 tasks in a month. So at the beginning of the month, and I know we're going to add about 20 tasks, so we start with 30, and then we go. And it's very unscientific, but to me, again, the benefit of working in small blocks, having a transparent process, iterating frequently, making the hard decisions as you go, far outweighs the dogma and overhead of having a really rigid process.
One thing also on just getting buy-in from senior executives, there's been a lot of books that have come out here in the past couple of years that are executive level books talking about just how business is changing, in particular this issue around adaptivity. I could give you a huge long list. I'll just give you two for now. Rita McGrath, the professor at Columbia Business School, just had a book at the end of Competitive Advantage. And again, part of just what she's talking about is how does a company become more adaptive and more emergent? And I think that's the language that you use to connect to this sort of process framework that you're running. Another that, depending on the size of your company, people might love or not, The Lean Startup by Eric Reeves. And it's not quite an agile process per se, but again, talking about this way of how does a company work in a way that's more iterative and trying to adapt what it's doing based on what it's learning. And a lot of what you learn from books like that is that it's not just for startups. You know, this is sort of a new way of doing business. And I think having those conversations is a great way to connect to, here's a specific methodology we can start to use in marketing to make this work.
So if I can repeat a little bit of the question just to make sure I have it. What are the characteristics of outside agencies you may work with or inside partners that you may work with that make them effective? Going back to the same things. The people that are open to change absolutely are more effective to work with around that. And that is to change the way they may be doing business today, and the way they may be building marketing assets today, to change that. And then within the engagement, the learning process and adaptability and prioritization that we've all talked about is that inherently we want to be able to change and shift priorities all the time. And for some human beings, that's a very difficult hurdle to deal with all the time. I'm set, I got it, I'm ready, I'm planned. Oh, I have to change to this? I don't like that. Some people are like that. So those that are more open to change, adaptable folks are going to be much better partners for you along the way.
Somebody who perhaps realizes that they have issues with how things are running now and they're looking for solutions to solve those problems. I didn't initially install Agile into my current company just because I wanted to get familiar with the culture and everything else. And now after a couple of months, I've been starting to open it up to several people, and all of a sudden, people are saying, "Oh wow, why haven't we been doing this before? It's really great." So, and they were seeing some of the same issues. So, and around priority and those sorts of things. So I think it's easier when you can make a good case to people about why you need to do this, if you can point out to some of the issues that are there already.
Can I just follow up on that? Because John brings up a good point. People are people, and they're going to react the way they're going to react. But one of the, and I like to give the kudos to somebody else on my team or a group of other people on my team who came up with this. But instead of moving forward to all the groups within the company as an example and saying, we're going to do Agile, this is how we're going to do it, my team went around and talked to every function in the company, the marketing. For us, that's about 17 different functions. We sat down and says, what drives you crazy in marketing when you have to get you have a lot of pressure, you have big stacks of things to do. What drives you nuts? And they told us, we wrote it all down, and everybody came back to the party, and we sat down on my team and said, all right, what do we hear? And we had probably 5 to 10 things, but number one on everybody's list was, I hate getting in the game too late. I want to be there at the beginning. I want to understand what everybody else is thinking. When we imposed Agile Marketing and went forward, and everybody boxed, changed, this is not the way it's going to work, we went back, and after the first pilot and the second pilot took place, we went back and put a piece of paper down and said, are you in the game any sooner than you used to be? And everybody went, yeah, we are. And we said, your second point that you made was, you aren't able to do this, but now you can do this. Guess what? Agile Marketing sold pretty quickly. When we showed them we were achieving what they asked us or pointed out to us were the big problems that they had.
And I want to follow up on that and just circle back on my point about communication earlier. I think that's another element of this, which is that if you start using Agile Marketing, it's so much easier for everybody to understand what's going on and have transparency, both within the team and then also externally as well.
Yeah, the only comment I would make is to echo what Frank talked about earlier. I think the economics of agency life work against you. So you have to be very careful that if your agency is on a retainer contract and they're giving you a whip every month, and it's got billable hours next to that, set of work, you're being overly agile on them, and they have their own process that they're trying to manage, which is essentially nested within your agile process. It can quickly become either very expensive or financially ruinous to the agency if you're overly agile with it. You've just got to be very, very careful about that process. Was my experience working with agencies. Many of them are more agile than you are. It's their nature. They have to be. They're dealing with many clients on a daily basis. It encourages an agile way of thinking, I think. But the economics are difficult.
Interesting thing, a couple of years ago, John and I interviewed a CMO of a bank in Tennessee about using Agile. One of the things he stated is Agile really helped him from a talent management standpoint. And I think it comes back to your original question, what kind of people, right? And his point was that the weak cling to waterfall. The weak spend more time planning. Your weakest members of your team will cling to documents and spreadsheets and planning and meetings. Your smartest people are the ones who are going to learn, adapt, adjust, digest data quickly. So I think the long story short of that is that, in agile environments, you need people who can deal with uncertainty. You need smart people. These are the kind of people you want to hire anyways. So I think that the environment actually suits the stronger, more aggressive, more results-oriented, more driven people on your team are probably going to be much more inclined towards agile.
So I know we're almost out of time. We've got maybe just one more brief question.
Just one quick question I have is, how about the ROI equation came out on both internal approval and when it's done? Has that been a challenge? Has that been easy to help with?
Are you asking ROI on a particular project, or are you on
Yes.
utilizing Agile
When
Marketing?
you go with the project, the Agile problem is how long it will take, what will cost. Well, it's hard answer.
Okay, I can be really transparent and open about this. I think it was Scott or Frank said it. Tools and measuring and burn down, and that's how you get to all those kind of answers. And we dove into that full bore. We got a tool, we paid for a tool, we started doing it, and what happened? My team spent 3/4 of every day inputting to a tool, as opposed to working the projects and helping to become more efficient, and we scrapped it. So from my perspective, the hard and fast dollars and cents, how much time was spent, how do you measure each group, which by the way doesn't go over well with each group. We abandoned it in the interest of becoming more efficient and getting things done better. That's the honest answer.
Did the tool stand in the way of agile adoption?
Only from my team, because they were now working till 10 o'clock at night, because they spent from 8:30 in the morning till 2:30 in the afternoon inputting to the tool and utilizing the tool to measure, to get burned down, to get time associated with the story points and all that kind of thing. And then the rest of the day they had to catch up and try to do engagements and try to follow up with people and that type of thing.
We'll get to your question real quick, Jim.
Yeah, I kind of want to follow up something that Frank talked about, burn down and things of that nature. One of the things that's a big difference for me in managing product management and marketing is that in product management, I'm trying to account for 100% of my development. In marketing, absolutely not the case, and I still haven't really found the balance out when you measure overhead versus you just kind of say, marketing has overhead. I'm just curious for the panel, what percent of your time do you think is actually accounted for in the Agile, things that are being tracked through Agile? What percent of the time do you just kind of consider marketing overhead, just kind of doing your day job?
So I know it's 43%. No, just kidding. No, I mean, for my team currently, my current team is myself, and I've got 2 people working for me, so it's small. And then my extended team is my CEO and my head of product, and they, and some folks in sales sometimes contribute, but 95+% of our tasks are in Scrum. We try to dump every single task in there, and occasionally someone will joke they have an off-budget task or something like that. But we try to get every single thing in there because it forces us on a daily basis to have it. And also, it also allows me to complain about data sheets and sales enablement battle cards and things that I don't like doing, and I don't think help us meet goals. So
I think we're out of time now, just be respectful of everyone's time, but I think some of our speakers.
Yeah, David had a follow-up.
It's not a follow-up, actually, it was a closing. That's all right, yes. Like a business letter. First of all, from EMC's perspective, I just want to thank our panel of Ian, Frank, and John for taking the time to share with all of you. And very special thanks to Scott for doing a great job moderating for us. We'd be running around in circles if we didn't have you, so thank you very much. But again, a big thank you to a little bit behind the scenes, but Sue from MyTech. Will you stand up, Sue? For those of you who are not MyTech members, I know part of the group here is from the Agile Meetup group. MyTech is a great organization, and consider joining up as we have at EMC. Great opportunities for shows and conferences and these kind of things take place. And Amy Callahan from EMC helped pull this together for the Boston Agile Meetup group, and it was a great job. I want to thank everybody for their time.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dan.